Welcome to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast, where we look inside the mind of seven-figure entrepreneurs to see how they amplify their business and amplify their life. Let's welcome today's guest. Welcome to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast. Today's guest is the creator of Kindlepreneur.com, a website devoted to teaching advanced book marketing. He's also the founder of Publisher Rocket, a book marketing software, and Atticus.io, a book writing and formatting software. He's a military veteran, husband and father of three crazy monkeys. Actually, he calls them kids as well. And he's worked with many New York Times best-selling authors. He believes real authors deserve to be read. Please welcome to the show, Dave Chesson. How you doing, Dave?
No, not too bad. And thank you for having me.
You seem a really casual kind of guy as well, Dave. I like that. You just seem chilled with life.
Yeah. You know, I like to take it one step at a time.
So Dave, firstly, what is a Kindlepreneur?
Well, you know, there's a lot of artists out there that really just want to sit down and just kind of write a book and they enjoy the writing process. And then there's others that are trying to, build something, build an author career, be able to feed their family with their art. And so I like to try to marry that together, the combination of the book writing skill as well as with the marketing skill, so that, great authors can be heard. And that's exactly what a Kindlepreneur is.
Cool. I love it. And I think do you think that kind of market has grown a lot as well over the last few years of more people wanting to write their own book?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a real change in the market when Amazon created Kindle Direct Publishing, the ability for authors to just self-publish their own books. Back in the day, it used to be about, you would have to write this amazing book, then you'd have to find some kind of agent, then maybe, just maybe, you might be able to get a publisher to pick you up. And, that process has a lot of problems and a lot of holes. I mean, after all, J.K. Rowling was rejected 11 times before finally somebody accepted a book, and it was only off of her agent calling in a favor. And that editor didn't even want to read it, gave a chapter to his daughter, who then came back and said, "Hey, great, can I read chapter 2?" And he was like, "What is this?" So, I mean, back in the day, it could have been the biggest money-making book of all time, like Harry Potter, and it just got rejected after rejected. So you were at the mercy of editors. But when Amazon created Kindle Direct Publishing, it gave anyone the ability to actually write and get it out there. And since Amazon is the world's largest book market, it was a real game changer. So when authors were able to do this, it became that the market was anyone who had a book in the back of their mind. They no longer had to go through the uppity system of publishing and publishing companies, and instead could take, their own destiny into their own hands and forge a path forward. But this also opened a whole bunch of questions like, great, once you hit publish, now what? How do you work with Amazon? And it's interesting is in the first couple of years of KDP, it was like the wild, wild west. People were just discovering, and anybody who published a book back then, honestly, was making some major bank because there was no competition. There was already an existing market on Amazon hungry for books. And so it was incredible. But then as the market started to flood with more people, it became a little bit harder. Now, here's the crazy part, though. For the first, I would say 3 years, publishing companies kind of thumbed their nose at the whole process. It was like, oh, well, that's not how it's been done, and we're not going to do that. And they really stopped looking at it. But now publishing companies are really getting wise and realizing Amazon's not going anywhere. And if you really want to survive in the book market, you've got to play by Amazon's rules. And now the coolest part is publishing companies are starting to look at self-publishers as free agents. Kind of like in the sports world where you've got this, proven commodity, and, they've written a whole bunch of books. They've had reviews. They've shown that they can market. They show that they can write. And now publishing companies are like, let's just go after those guys, and sign them. We know we got something. And so it's been a really awesome market. It's really changed over the years, and there's still a lot of great opportunity.
And it sounds quite similar to like the music industry, what's happened over there, right, as well, where they've just gone, okay, let's go and take someone who's already gone and created their own massive following on their own and then go, oh, we'll sign you to the record label. Now you've already got a fan base, rather than, oh, we're going to make you into a star. Let's just go and take stars.
Right. Before things like Spotify, and I get it. Some of the original authors still thumb their nose at Spotify, and I get that. There's some issues on that component. However, though, it now allows anybody to enter into the music market. I could sit down and create a song, not that it'd be good, but I could create something and put it on Spotify for anybody to listen. 10, 15 years ago, you had to go through the gatekeepers. You had to get a record label. You had to convince a radio station to show. Now you just upload and you go. And so this really opens this new kind of market where you, like I said before, you control your own destiny. And now it comes down to your art, writing, or making music, and then the marketing component. And there's a lot more authors as well as musicians that are saying, why do I need the record label? And so, like, for example, there's a whole bunch of authors that start off as self-publishing. And then finally, when the publishing companies come to them, they're like, that's cool and all, but you guys are taking a major percentage of the books that I'm getting 100% on. Why do I need you? And in many cases, they're like, your reason why I need you is not good enough. Peace be with you. So it's really cool. I'm very interested to see where the market goes in the next 5 or 10 years. But creating this free market has been a game changer to allow anyone, to really enter in.
Yeah, definitely. We're living in this gig economy now, and I think that's only going to develop and develop and develop. So what's interesting, so I was going through your site as well, Dave, and one of the things that I saw, 7 unique things about Dave. And one of those is the fact that you've got dyslexia. Now, yes. Some people would say, okay, so he's in book publishing, but he's got dyslexia. That's a weakness, but you've turned it into a strength. Right. So how has dyslexia affected the career path and the nature of where you've got to with publishing?
Well, when I was going through high school, I barely passed English. As a matter of fact, when I was in college, I went as far away from English as possible and got as a physics major. And it's not that I didn't want to write. It's just I could never really piece it together. And so when I decided, and my kind of life situation put me where writing books was a really good opportunity. But the problem is that I'm not a good enough writer to sit down and write anything I want. I'm not Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway could sit down and write a book about how to tie your shoes, and it would probably be amazing. And people would love it and analyze it and break it apart. I would be that one where I wrote the book and people would be like, really? So I learned from the get-go that I couldn't just sit down and write whatever I wanted. I was not good enough. Let's just put it that way. Now, I learned, though, especially like going to parties. I did a lot. I was actually a military diplomat in the military. And so I would see that you would go to this party, and if you knew one thing that everybody at the party wanted to know, you didn't have to be the greatest orator in the party. You were the life of the party. That's it. If you had the answer, done. So I applied that principle to my writing. And what I did was I started by analyzing Amazon and say, all right, Amazon has millions of people typing things into it, looking for a certain book. If I could figure out what they're looking for and find out where there isn't a market for it, so they're not getting what they want, and it's something that I feel like I could write and explain or discuss or, simplify, there we have it. And when I started to do that, that was a real game changer for me. Now, over the years, writing every day, I would have to say that my writing has improved dramatically. And, that's just, writing is a skill. It's like juggling. You have to just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more you'll be able to juggle. But it was such a game changer. And that's really what kind of was a big proponent for creating kindlepreneur.com, the blog, was I started to look at Amazon and say, why does Amazon choose to show this book over this one? Why is the market doing this? Or how can I figure out what the market is up to? And when I looked around on the internet, I didn't see anything that was discussing it. I didn't see any authors analyzing Amazon or any of the online markets. And so that was where I got the idea to start Kindlepreneur and start chronicling the processes that I use to help create these books.
Yeah, it's really interesting how when something, like you said, when we look at when we're younger, then becomes something that drives us forward to do a lot more with it as we get older. So I love that fact about like how you've turned that around. So that's amazing. And you do seem to have quite a strong mindset as well. So you've done Ironman triathlons, which anyone who can do one of those gets a lot of credit from me. Do you think having that military background and training for an Ironman has actually helped you in business?
A little bit. I think a lot of it, like, in truth, I've always been very determined about if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. You know, I one of my business principles is I only do business with those that fear dishonor. And I think that's really important because somebody could have the greatest product in the world and it's really cool. But when crap hits the fan, or when something goes wrong, or an issue happens and a customer's really mad, the question is that will that person do the right thing? Right? Does that person fear dishonor? And if the answer is no, then no matter how good their product is or how great this business partnership is, I won't do it. And it's something that I've kind of applied throughout my life as I've gone through. Before I joined the military, I actually started a fraternity at my college, and that was a hard process, trying to convince, some 100 cash-strapped guys to pool their money together to build an organization, so that we could do even more together instead of individually. That was huge. But the military, I think, definitely formed it. I think it gave me more structure in my life. And so I don't discredit it, but I do think it was this internal thing where if I said I was going to do something, by golly, I will do it. Even if it requires me to shove this square peg through those round holes, I will cut those corners off if I have to.
Yeah. So maybe it was already there, and then being in the military just helped, like I say, structure it and then guide that forward and get you where you've got to now. So what's also interesting is, you started off writing books and then you've gone into software as well. So you've got Publisher Rocket and Atticus as well. So is software something that you actually wanted to go into, or did you just was like, do you know what? There's a gap in the market, so I'm going to fill it.
Good Lord, no, I definitely didn't want to go into software. Now, I'll still to this day tell anybody I do not know how to program. That being said, though, was that with Kindlepreneur, I generated a lot of traffic. I did a lot of SEO, and I started looking and seeing that my website was selling a lot of this other software called Kindle Samurai. And Kindle Samurai was sort of a program that kind of did what I wanted, but not all the way. It only worked on PC, not Macintosh. And some of the components were broken because the programmer who developed it was just a programmer. He wasn't a self-publisher. He just kind of found a little thing, created it, and threw it up there, moved on to another program. And so when things broke, he never fixed it. He also didn't speak English as a primary language, so there was zero support. But the fact that program was selling, and I knew it was selling because I was an affiliate and I was selling it, I was like, wow, okay, if I could just create this program, but make it for Mac and PC, that's already a winner. But I know some key things that I could do to make this even better. And it would really fit with the content and the strategies that I use. It also make my writing life much better, that much easier. And when I was combined with that, it was a done deal. And that, in the great words of Admiral Farragut, darn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, right? We're going to hit a lot of road bumps, but I know that this will work. And so someone who doesn't know programming, who doesn't have that background, I've got to figure this out. So I started by trying to find programmers. Luckily, I got connected with somebody who really helped me who understood programmers, and then helped me to find the right kind of programmer. Because let's face it, you go to like Upwork or all those, and you post something, and everybody apparently can build anything,
Yeah.
and the pricing is just wild. One thing I'll say to anybody who's looking at programming is that most programmers will, they'll say, yeah, I think I could do that. Or, I'm sure I can find something online where somebody's already kind of done that. There's a whole bunch of open source stuff out there. I can piece that together. Man, that's usually not the case. I'll say this. What you really want to do is find the one that's like, look, we'll scope out the project first, and then I'll come back with a price. That means that they're going to verify they can do it. That's always a good situation. But luckily, I got to skip that pain because somebody found the right programming, got me in touch. And one thing I will also recommend too is that when you do this, I recommend thinking about giving a percentage of revenue or profit to the programmer. That was one of the best ideas I ever had, because when I did that, it was now on the program. And by the way, in order to keep getting their 10% or whatever it was, they had to keep fixing it and improving it to a certain extent. If there was a brand new feature, that might be another, add-on. But let's keep tweaking this. Let's make it better. So when he knew that he was going to have to do that, he immediately came back on the initial thing and he was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this, but we're going to do it with this programming language and this platform because I don't want to have to keep fixing it. I was like, yes, great. And he said, this is going to be a lot harder, but this is the better thing. And so I'm very fortunate that we did that. So I'd recommend it to someone. So anyways, we built, it was called KDP Rocket at the time, now called Publisher Rocket. And, I didn't have to be some genius marketer or giant launch person or anything. Matter of fact, I still don't really. I'm not a launch specialist. I sent out one email to people who had ended up signing up for my, early sign up, and I'd already made back all the money I'd spent in development, wow. in like the first 24 hours. So I was like, well, great. And then I put it on my articles and things like that. And over the years, it's just dramatically grown. Word of mouth has been incredible. And so at that point, I'm like, well, okay, I've got a significant software, something that is bringing a major amount of revenue. I need to learn a little bit more about this industry. I need to have a bit more control too, and what I mean by that is programmers would say things. And I'm just like, oh, is that what we, okay, cool. And I'd be at the mercy of them. And I'm not saying that I'm a control freak. I'm really not. But when your, livelihood, when your business's success is completely dependent on this sort of thing, I realized that I had to improve myself. So I started reading a whole bunch of books on programming languages, program development, and what I mean by language, I mean the communication, certain words. When somebody says agile, what does that actually mean? When they, what does back end and front end mean? All of these terms and trying to understand the structure of organizations in programming. But I did not spend any time learning a program language like JavaScript or any of those things. So I started to study on that. And then what I also did was I started looking for the opportunity of buying into a software development company so that I could be on the inside and then also choose who got to work. And so that was kind of the kickstart that really pushed me down the whole software development side.
And then did that lead to creating the second software? Was that with the same person, or do you do that in the software company that you bought into?
Well, and that was the thing is that to develop something like Atticus.io, which is an insane program in complexity, we're doing something that nobody in the writing industry has ever done. Right now, authors will pay for a outlining software. Then they'll pay for a book writing software like Scrivener, which is specializing for large, writing, large amounts of writing. Then they'll pay for, they'll go back and forth with editors because they'll probably export to Word. And then they'll pay for a formatting software so as to format it into a book and ebook. Well, I'm like, that sucks. And so can we build something where it does all four things? Now, when you start to combine more, the complexity goes through the roof. And so to streamline the process and have the right user experience, UX, see that language coming through, developing the right UX so that it's super intuitive. That was the big thing. And so I needed a phenomenal team to not only figure out each four components, because let's face it, each component by its own is its own industry. Now to do each one better than anybody else and combine them, I had to have talent. And there's a quote by Bill Gates that still rings true, that one above average programmer is worth 100 average programmers. And he's not exaggerating. You could have 10 average programmers working on something, and it may take them 3-4 months to get through something, or the above average comes in and 1 week later it's completely done and they've already advanced something else on top of it. I'm no joke. So in order to create something like this, I really had to get a lot of good talent. And that's really pushed me into, I guess, my new growth, which is learning how to recruit good talent and to identify it.
So let's lead on to that point. How do you know what is good cheese versus bad cheese?
Well, first off, is I've stopped trusting my intuition.
Yeah.
It's funny is the more books you read about it, everybody says that we're so biased when we're sitting in on an interview. Like it's terrible. You look at a person, you're like, oh yeah, this person's great. They have a good demeanor. They responded to this question right. I like them. That does not mean that that's actually the right person for that particular job. And so I started to discover things like job scorecards, which really helps to kind of set your mind right in truly understanding what it is this particular job actually needs. And man, I use the job scorecard. Once I've developed one, I use it through the development of the job description, the interview process, and then also, the onboarding process as well. Like, what kind of training do they need to go through, and how do we evaluate that this was the right choice? Like, all of these things really stem off that initial exercise. And so developing a job scorecard has been huge. The other thing is identifying culture fit. One of my favorite exercises that we did was I've done a bunch of hires, some great, some horrendous, some okay, some I wish I could redo. And so I went back through all of those, and we started to analyze what went wrong. Like, this person, I'm not going to say any particular name, but there was one person, perfect technically. I mean, the person had the background, they had the demeanor, they had all of these things that would have just been perfect. But in the end, they kind of just, I won't go into what, but they decided this is just not it for them. I was like, man, where did we go wrong on this? Because this would have been so amazing for both of us. Like, it really would have been good for their life if they had stuck with it. So what went wrong? And I realized culture fit, they had all of those things, but they did not have the demeanor that fit with the rest of the team, especially in the area they worked in. And so defining the culture fit was a big thing. And so again, like, when I went through each one of these failures and successes, I started to see this is why this person failed. This is why this person succeeded. And it's not that the person that failed is wrong. It's that it was the wrong position for them. And that's on me. Or the other thing too, is there were a couple of times that I looked and I didn't have a great onboarding system. I just thought this person's qualified. This is great. Let's give them the account. Let's send, I'll put them through a training here or there. And all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 months later, they're like drowning. And I'm like, what the heck? You've been doing this for 4 months already, and you have not caught up. Like, what's the dealio? And so that was another critical mistake. So to recap everything we just kind of went over, first off, I think it's really important to look into a job scorecard. It's a great mental process to get you thinking about what exactly this job is. And let me tell you, by the end of it, what you thought you were hiring to what you actually need to hire is so different. The second thing is go through your past mistakes and your past successes and ask yourself why. Really take that time. Really look at it. You're going to discover some amazing things. And then finally, make sure that you really think through the onboarding process as well as evaluation. And if that way, you'll be more effective and efficient in figuring out if this was or wasn't the right hire. You're not going to always get it right, but you better be prepared to figure that out sooner rather than later. Otherwise, that section of your business is going to suffer.
I want to recap on that as well. So just to make sure we've got all those steps. So firstly, it's almost like creating a top trumps card. So just like look at the card and go, yeah. So who won on that level? Yeah, they're better than that in that respect, and so on and so forth. Then number 2, like an NFL coach watching back the tape. So going, okay, cool. Where did we win that play? Where did we lose that play? Why did we lose that play? And so on and so forth. And then thirdly, on the onboarding and evaluation, something that we do in our business. Well, firstly, one of our core values is responsibility. So I have the responsibility in my business is that everything is my fault. Like, anything goes wrong, it's my fault because I haven't put a system or process in place to make that work. And then the other part of onboarding, I'm not sure about yourself, but one of the things that we do is we do a weekly check-in with each member of staff, which is just 10 minutes where they've done the daily assessments all week. And then we go, right, let's have a look. And then one of the things you want to look at on that as well is happiness rating. So we have a happiness rating each week, and it's like if that drops below a 10, I'm like, okay, cool. What's going on? What support do you need from me in the next 7 days to get that back up? I'd be interested to hear your experience on that as well. Like in terms of when you say about evaluation, is that looking at it on daily, on a weekly basis? Like what kind of systems and processes do you put in for that?
Yeah. So for the evaluation / onboarding, I think they're really a part of each other. Okay. How fast the person is picking up the process. Again, it needs to be tied together. For me, we break it up into a weekly component. In this week, this is what we will cover. Like this is the focus on the onboarding process for this person. But then the hard part is how do we evaluate that they did those things correctly? And so we actually will create tests, we'll create, and it's not just subjective. We have to figure out quantifiable ways of judging that the person did it. So for example, this person needs to take this entire course, to get them trained. So one of the evaluations is, did they finish it by said date? And there's a way that we can check that. And if they didn't, and they said they did, that's a critical failure. That's lying. And so that's a major hit. And then that needs to be addressed and brought up. And there's like, again, all these little things in there. It's not so much like we're setting up tests because we don't trust them. It's just we want to validate or verify that they are on pace, and we truly have thought through that this is a legitimate pace we think somebody who is qualified for the job should be able to maintain. We also may have certain questions to ask, certain tasks to give. Hey, write this article, based off the training you had, write this article. And then we evaluate the article and verify, did they do X, Y, and Z? Like these things need to kind of be in place. And that I think is a very important part. And again, this goes back to the scorecard because developing that is on the scorecard. And when you're sitting down and having to think through week 1, this person needs to do X, Y, and this is how we're going to evaluate. All of a sudden you're like, oh man, that needs to be in the description, or that needs to be one of our questions in the interview. And it just starts the whole entire process all the way through onboarding, helps to generate and reform what you think the job is, or what the responsibilities actually entail, or what the requirements will be. And that's why I think the scorecard is such a important part to the hiring process.
It's so powerful. And anyone listening to this, just listen back to that section, because at scale, if you don't get that part right, people think it's the boring stuff, but it's the stuff that like makes a difference massively. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Dave. And one question that we ask everyone on the show, and this is a deep question: what do you want to be remembered for when you die?
Well, when we talk about generations, like in the family, I think that's the big thing. I would prefer that my family, my children, my grandchildren, think well of me than strangers that are out there. So for me, this is going to change a lot of life choices. We want to, be able to go have adventures together, create, family wealth that goes beyond. And that's not just financial. That's all these other components that actually develop into the word wealth. So we're really focusing on generational actions as a family. And I would say that I'm going to kind of augment your question to be more centered around that particular thing. And I think it's just being kind of a leader in the family, I think is really what I hope that my family will think.
Yeah. And I think that's super powerful, right? It's different for everyone. It's different for everyone of what they feel internally. Some people are like you say, just want to impact as many strangers as possible and like put this big message out to the world. Other people are like, hey, I want to have a massive impact on the people closest to me, and have that continue. So,
and I think it comes down to what people's definition of success is. We have Elon Musk, who phenomenal, brilliant, very successful in businesses, plural. Not the kind of family life I'd want ever. I think at one point, I think he cried, talking about, issues with love or, and he's talked about kind of some of the things in the past, some of the choices he made, and he made sacrifices, and he made them willingly. In his mind, I will agree with him. He's a very successful man, but that would not be my definition of success. I love the fact that I have a very strong marriage and that I have 3 phenomenal kids, and where we're going as a family. Does that hinder my business? To some, they may say I could have gone further if I just cut them off and move forward. But again, I think what's most important, especially for us in business, is we really have to understand what our definition of success is, where we envision ourselves in the future, because otherwise you can make the wrong mistake and you may look back at your life and be like, oh man, what was I thinking? So really take that time to understand that about yourself.
Yeah, definition of success is really, really powerful, and I think it is different for everyone. And at the same time, you can't hit a target that you can't see, so you've got to define what that is, which is super, super important. So before we finish today, Dave, what's one quick win that people can use to amplify the business today?
Changing your lifestyle. Especially when I first started off, there's a very fine line between a hobby and a career. It doesn't sound like it, but it really is. When we do this, a hobby is something you do when you feel like you can, or maybe you want to. I mean, let's face it. I love scuba diving. Boy, would I love to go scuba diving all the time, but it's a hobby. I do it when I can, or whenever I feel like it, or whenever it fits into a vacation or a lifestyle. I didn't treat writing, or I didn't treat my business as a hobby. I instead changed my lifestyle to make it a career. And one of the things I highly recommend to people is actually book it in your calendar. For me, I got up every morning at 4:30 a.m. and I worked on this business till at least 7:30 a.m. when I had to get ready for work to go to work, because I was still doing a 9-to-5 job. I did that Monday through Sunday. Because I did that, because it was a part of every day of my life, no matter what, and nothing got in the way of it, because let's face it, there's no kids, there's no nothing contacting you at 4:30 in the morning. I think that was a huge, huge reason as to why I succeeded. Then being somebody who had worked on this for like 7 years and spinning their wheels and not really making a lot of traction. So I would say truly make it a part of your lifestyle if you want this to be a career instead of just a hobby.
That's powerful stuff to hear as well, because a lot of, like you say, a lot of people are spinning the wheels 6-7 years down the line. And I used to be a drummer as well, like when I was a kid, and then went on to play other musical instruments as well. But so I could technically say I've been a drummer since I was 11 years old. So oh god, this might me feel old. So 19 years I've been a drummer. But however, there may be drummers out there who've been playing for 2 years that are better than me, because it's that compounded effect of the 10,000 hours. So if you do something every day, you're going to get a lot more success than, like, I could pick up a drum kit and play a tune, but I'm not going to be like playing on big stages with the Foo Fighters. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And the other mistake that people will do is they try to fit it in at the end of the day. Well, let's face it, at the end of the day, it could have been a bad day at work. Could have had coworkers be like, let's go out and get drinks, or I could just be exhausted. And now I'm going to try to fit in this thing. Maybe, let's face it, I'm probably not. Probably going to go to Netflix and binge or something. And there goes a day. And then the next day is easier to do it again and again. And so this is where things really get drawn out, and you're never able to, like you said, compound and build upon, and really see the kind of movement that we hope for.
Yeah. Compound the time and prioritize what's important. That's fantastic advice. So firstly, what 7-figure entrepreneur would you nominate to be on the show next, Dave? And where can people find out more about you?
Well, let's see. I mean, one of them is Jeff Rose. He is the lead on goodfinancialsense.com. He has been incredible in helping people with kind of like making money on the side, as well as investing correctly. And he's been doing that for years. He's an excellent person on that. As for me, you can find me at kindlepreneur.com. That's like Kindle Entrepreneur, kindlepreneur.com. We have a contact page there, so you can click that. And if there's any questions one has from this podcast, hit me up there.
Fantastic. So go to kindlepreneur.com. You've been listening to the Amplify to 7 Figures podcast with me, Paul Ace, and my amazing guest, Dave Chesson. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Remember, amplify your business and amplify your life. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Amplify to Seven Figures podcast. To access the show notes, episodes, and this month's giveaway, head over to www.amplifyto7figures.com. Remember, amplify your business, amplify your life.